Hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 40 of the Australian Rock Show. My name is Dennis Gray from the Rockin' and Rollin' Gray Brothers. Today is Sunday, the 27th of September, 2015, when this show is being recorded. Now, if you were around on the Sydney live circuit in the early 90s, it is likely you would remember Judge Mercy, a loud, authentic hard rock outfit who were an amazing live band and one, like so many others, who should have achieved greater success. Led by Andy Cichon, who'd previously spent time in Swanee and mid-80s era Rose Tattoo, Judge Mercy had great songs and should have taken the world. Since their demise, Adelaide boy Cichon has made his mark on the big stadium stages around the world, most notably as a band member for both Shania Twain and Billy Joel, names which he has long been associated with. However, when I hear his name, I instantly think of his time with the Tats and also Judge Mercy, a band whom I saw live on a number of occasions. When we started this podcast, Andy was one of the first names we penciled in to have on the show, and I'm pleased to say that yesterday, Saturday the 26th of September, we got a hold of Andy from New York City and had a good and fairly detailed chat about his amazing career. It's an interview which we'll get to shortly, but before we do, let's crank the volume and get in the mood with some Judge Mercy. Lifted from their 1993 album Protocol So Holy, here is Bury Me Down. Andy, welcome to the Australian Rock Show.
Dennis, pleased to be here. Greetings from Brooklyn, New York on a lovely autumn Friday night.
Nice. Well, mate, we kick off each show with a notable song, and on this show we started with the Judge Mercy tune Bury Me Down, lifted from the Protocol So Holy album. What are your memories of recording that album and that song in particular?
That song, we played it live quite a bit, and obviously we played live a lot. That's sort of where we, in some ways, I think we were better live than on record. But that song was, I remember writing the lyric out in Centennial Park, I think it was, just sitting out there and bury me down with your keepsakes at last. How can you mess with a dead man's honor? It was pretty much. I haven't thought about that song in so long. It was pretty much a song about trying to compete with a girl's memory of a lost spouse or partner who had passed away, and it was almost like impossible to do that. It's like, the person that had gone had been an important person in this person's life, and I, the singer, is the new guy, and is trying to compete with this sort of holier than thou personality, and that's what I remember about the lyric. Recording was done at drums tracked at EMI, a great old Studio 301, and we overdubbed at a place called Trackdown out in Petersham. And then I guess I would have done vocals in New Jersey at the House of Music and mixed it over here. And that was a long time ago, 1990, late 92, I think, right?
That's correct. And I'm going to make you think a bit more. We will cover Judge Mercy in this interview, but let's start by drifting right back to your earliest days in Adelaide. Were you raised in a musical household?
I was. My dad was an amateur musician. He played in marching brass bands. He played piano, and he started me on piano first. And from that, I taught myself guitar. And he came from Berlin, and I remember spending a Christmas over in Berlin when I was about 12 years old. And it was all about visiting family, but I kind of got bored after a while and just got stuck in my bedroom, the bedroom I was staying in over there, with my uncle's old guitar, an archtop acoustic, and that's sort of where I learned how to play kind of status quo songs and stuff like that, and that was really it for me, I guess. When I was 12 is when I really started to learn how to play rock and roll, and but it came from Dad, and Dad was the kind of guy that Max Cichon passed away now 5 years ago, but I remember whenever I'd come to town, to Adelaide on tour, he'd come to the Bridgeway or wherever we were playing in Adelaide, and Sunday night was always at a venue called the Tivoli, and I'd go to dinner at my parents' place, and I'd always just say, do you want me to put your name on the door tonight, Dad? And it didn't matter who it was. It could be Rose Tattoo or James Ray, and whoever I was playing with at the time. And he's like, son, I've got to go to work the next day, but just in case. And sure enough, 10 minutes after we'd go on stage, you could see the entrance to the venue from the stage, and there'd be my old man checking us out. You know, he was the inspiration for it. That's where I definitely get it from, for sure.
Nice. So after you returned at 12 with that acoustic guitar, did you go on to take guitar lessons?
All I, as far as guitar and bass is concerned, I think I had to play classical guitar at high school, which I did for about 3 months. And I actually got kicked out of the music department for being a bit of a rebel and refusing to play. This is high school now. This is like 14, I guess. Refusing to play piano for the choir that was doing a Gilbert and Sullivan thing, HMS Pinafore. And I had to deal with my parents that as long as I got a B grade average, they would let me play 4 or 5 nights a week in the band I was playing in. And I was a good kid. I didn't mess up because all I wanted to do was play music. So I basically told my music teachers that I don't have time to play in the choir thing. I'm busy doing, math, physics, chemistry, and economics. And I didn't learn my stuff, and they kicked me out of the music program. So there was those 3 months of playing classical guitar, and from that, I guess I transitioned to playing bass because my dad had a dance band, and I could read. So I could read bass clef from playing piano. I taught myself guitar, and then I could read my way through some basic, Herb Albert tunes and stuff, and that's how I kind of switched to bass at like 14.
Okay, that's good. I was going to ask you about how you got into bass guitar. So was that Morialta High School you attended?
It was, yes. Yeah. That's,
okay, did Jim Keys, I think Jim Keys from Master's Apprentices attended that as well?
I don't think so, because when I went there, it was a brand new school. So it only opened in about, so I was in the 3rd year of intake. So that would have been, I would have started going there in 76. So I think, no, it was a brand new school then in like 74. So I doubt, it would have been, okay. He would have been gone by then.
A few years earlier, sure.
Yeah.
Mate, what was the first record you purchased?
It's actually in my basement here right now. My Aunt Margaret gave me a copy of A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles. And it was in mono. It's on the Parlophone label. It's one of the sort of few things I didn't sell when I moved to the States back in '97. That's what really got me switched on to music. That, and then I think the first thing I bought was probably the double live album by Status Quo, because that was probably the first rock show I saw when I was like 12 or 13, and I just loved it. Just changed my life. It was awesome. Straight ahead boogie rock and roll. I loved it. So probably that Status Quo live record, double live album, the Beatles' Hard Day's Night, and then the other big one for me was Get Your Yayos Out by the Stones. I mean, I was probably too young to really be into that, but I was playing with guys who were a lot older than I was, and they turned me on to it. That, and probably the other big record would be Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. I love live rock and roll records, and kind of with a harder edge. I love big, fat guitars. I remember that from a very, very young age.
All great bass players as well in those lineups, and I guess you mentioned Status Quo. You would have ran into Al Lancaster around the traps in the late 80s, early 90s?
I did. When I moved to Sydney in late '84 to join Rose Tattoo, and Alan had already moved there, and I did some recording at his studio, Earth Media. I think, thinking back now, they probably were Rose Tattoo demo sessions or something like that. And I would see Alan around from time to time, and also he was playing with the Party Boys. I think Angry or Swanee was working with him at the time. So yeah, I was acquainted with Alan for sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but around 78, 79, you played bass with local outfit The Innocents, who, from what I've been told over the years, were an amazing band comprised of young and really gifted musicians. Was this a band you formed with?
No,
not
you're
correct?
Wrong. I never played in The Innocents. I never played in The Innocents.
Wow. Okay.
I've seen that. Somebody pointed that out to me once. No, I never was in The Innocents. I was in a band in Adelaide called La Rocks, and that was around that time from when I was about 14, 15. Actually, it was called Snatch to start with, and then people changed, and we were called La Rocks, which was interesting in that we were playing mainstream kind of venues at the time that were more dance clubs, like discos in the day, I guess, But we didn't play covers. We played, like 60% original material, and so we kind of broke the mold a little bit. And that's what I did till I was like 18, I guess. So that would take it up to 81. And but no, I never played in the Innocents. I was into seeing bands like I nearly joined a band called the Hounds. They were a big band out of Adelaide that moved to Sydney and did some recording. We're going to sort of break out. And I was asked to join them, but I think it was 15 or 16, and they were moving to Sydney, and I was just too young, So the Hounds, Cunning Stunt. Yeah, we became Swanee. They were the bands I was checking out at the time.
That's interesting. So, case in point, never believe everything you read.
No,
so you had no involvement with involvement with those guys. You had no involvement with those guys like Chris Purcell, Arch Larissa.
None whatsoever. I don't know them at all. No, I don't know where that ever started. Yeah.
We need to rewrite that. So, I guess as an Adelaide boy, did you often rub shoulders with others on the rock scene, say Craig Shangrady or the Heaven guys, Laurie Marlowe or Alan Fryer?
I knew Heaven had already kind of gone before I left Adelaide, but right. I know Laurie really well from when I got to Sydney. Actually, when in '84 when I joined Rose Tattoo, and I knew Craig and all the guys in BB Steel. In fact, I played on the BB Steel record, so I did that. I did that entire album, I believe, and so I knew Craig and all those guys. I didn't know Alan very well, but I definitely knew Laurie and especially John Hayes and Mark Evans, of course. And but I used to see Heaven play around Adelaide as well as my first memories of really being excited was seeing the Angels played at my high school. Going to see Cold Chisel at the Arkabar and the Bridgeway and just in awe, in absolute awe. I love that. That feeling comes by so rarely now, but waiting for the band to come on stage and looking at the gear and all that stuff. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was just so exciting.
Well, you mentioned to me recently that the first time you heard Rose Tattoo's Rock and Roll Outlaw and Countdown, that was a major influential musical moment for you. You literally sprinted through your house to the TV, which is when you laid eyes on the Tats for the first time. I guess that's an interesting story. So, in fact, you heard them before you saw what they looked like.
Exactly, and it's like it was yesterday again. I remember I was washing the dishes with my mother in the kitchen. There's a long hallway down to the living room where the TV was, and I heard that riff for Rock and Roll Outlaw, and I'm like, my God, what is that? And I sprinted down the hallway and sort of turned the corner and laid eyes on them. I'm like, oh my God, they're animals. I've never seen anything like it. And that riff was so filthy. In fact, knowing that I was going to speak to you today, I found the clip on YouTube again from Countdown, and it's just so awesome. It's just, obviously they were miming. That's how Countdown was, but it was just the sound of that riff, man. It blew me away. And also, years later, I remember still in Adelaide, on Friday night in Rundle Mall shopping somewhere, had a scarves, and the first time I heard Scarred for Life came on. The album had just come out, and I'm like, man, that is just mighty. Just a mighty, mighty riff. They were riff meisters, those guys.
So I guess musically, what are you doing in the early 80s?
Early 80s, I'm actually sitting in my bedroom from 81 to 84 and practicing. I'd quit playing altogether. And
really?
I just realized that I kind of was starting to hatch a plan that, if I'm going to do this seriously, I really need to work hard. And the plan was always to get my chops down, get a demo. I was listening to Van Halen at the time and Rainbow, which is interesting because now I play with Dave Rosenthal and Chuck Berge in Billy Joel's band, who were both in Rainbow back in the day. So and Brand X, who Chuck Berge was in Brand X, and so I was listening to that stuff and really shedding, really in my room, practicing, not playing live at all. And then it was early '84 where I decided that's it. I had a straight job at the time. I was working as a research assistant in marine biology in the University of Adelaide, and that was a great job. But I just couldn't get the monkey off my back, and I just made a decision to go for it, and did the demo, sent out the headshots to all the management companies in Sydney with help from my friend and ex-manager Brian Gleason in Adelaide, who's a big promoter there, and I got the shot to audition for Rose Tattoo at the end of '84.
Okay, and of course you replaced Geordie Leach in Rose Tattoo. Let's talk about that for a little bit. So, do you know why they chose to cover Steppenwolf's "Born to Be Wild"? I know that song did pretty well on the charts.
Yeah, I was, to tell you the truth, I was pretty disappointed when that decision was made because, Angry had just done Mad Max, and I guess it sort of fit the look of the movie and the whole Road Warrior thing and Born to Be Wild, and it's just, I'd submitted a song for the record, which was actually became this first single, the second single off the next album, which was called "Gotta Get It Right." The way the song ended up. After the lush production of the producer involved, it was nothing like the original demo, which was a very hard-edged rock and roll song. And we thought that was John Mayer, the guitar player at the time, and the musical director was like, well, this is the single. Got to Get It Right. It's going to be the single. And we basically went into the studio to record that. And at that time, we were kind of hijacked by... well, it wasn't hijacked. It was a combination of Mark Opitz and management and probably Gudinski going, look, let's just, it's not really, so much Rose Tattoo anymore. The band's gone. What about we do this? And we kind of looked at each other and went, really? A cover? And so we were kind of disappointed. Having said that, Mark did a great job. And it is a great, yet again, doing my homework today, I listened to that for the first time in 20 years or whatever it was. And I'm like, it's a good version of the song, but kind of...
Well, if you read, a lot of people say that it's the definitive cover of that song outside of the Steppenwolf.
Well, I'm glad that they say
original.
Cover because, the original version always has to be, that's the version. But yeah, I mean, we put some time into it. It was, I still remember the buzz I got. That was the first time I ever heard myself on the radio, like driving down New Southhead Road in towards my place in Bondi and going like, hell, I'm on the radio. And I pulled over and it's like, it was kind of a cool moment for a kid. I was 21 at the time, I think. So, yeah.
You know what? You've just made me hark back. I interviewed Chris Palethorpe from Hush many, many years ago, and he told me the same thing. First time he was driving down New Southhead Road, he heard himself on the radio. So there must be something about that road.
Maybe, man. And I loved Hush as a kid. I really did. Hush, Slade, I loved those bands. They were great. Today,
all those songs.
Having a bit of a listen back, I was also listening to some old Band and Young stuff. My kids actually love all the old Flash in the Pan stuff, and
really?
And that led me then to Evie and the whole thing. And I've ended up listening to Riff Raff from Live at the Apollo, and that was just a great trip down memory lane.
Well, I really like the song Sun's Gonna Shine, written by Angry and John Mayer, which was the B-side to Born to Be Wild. And I'm going to play that in a moment. Personally, I think songs like that can stand proudly alongside the classic Rosie Tats material. But I just want to go back a little bit to 1986's album Beats from a Single Drum, an album that Angry is on record as saying he regretted recording as it's such a pop-oriented album. Yet I don't think the album was without its high points. Songs like Runaway, Say Goodbye, Michael Riley, in particular, were good tunes. I mean, they weren't Mansell Madness or Nice Boys, but the album wasn't without its moments. Now, I can, as you just alluded to, I can recall a comment from you in the Sydney Street Press some years later stating something like, in your opinion, the album should have turned out much heavier. And I guess if you look at the song I just mentioned, Sun's Gonna Shine, that's a good indication of how heavy Beats from a Single Drum could have been.
I agree, and I will say this, that I co-wrote 7 or 8 songs on that record. John Mayer had sadly departed at that point. I think he saw the writing on the wall, and when we brought in, a really hard-working guy, Kevin Beamish, who was REO Speedwagon's producer. Right there, as soon as they started wheeling in keyboards and stacking the vocals up, 6-7-part harmonies, it was like, okay, this is different. You're probably going to lead to this eventually, so let's just do it right now. Suddenly, that's a song I wrote as a kid on piano when I was like 17 years old, and they had a beautiful grand piano in it right in Osprey Studios, and I was just in there playing the piano this day, playing this song I'd written as a kid, and Kevin Beamish, the producer, walked in and said, "What's that?" I said, "What, the song?" He said, "I wrote it as a kid." It's like, "Why didn't you submit it for the record?" And I said, "Because it's a Rose Tattoo album. It's got nothing to do with what we do." He's like, "No, man, that's a hit. We're going to knock that into shape. That's a hit in the States." And next minute, there you go. We've got a big power ballad that, it was like, okay, I made a couple of bucks out of it and stuff, and, Kylie married Jason and all that stuff, but I had absolutely no intention of being on that record, and keyboards and the whole thing were, we kind of felt like it was a little out of our hands. There's a lot of work that went into the record, and it was so different. It really should have just been an angry solo record, but, Angry's a rock and roller, so it was a bit of a rudderless ship, I think, at the time. Look, I had a great time in that band, and it was my start, and I've got to thank, actually, Joe Walsh for my start, because he was the guy that actually gave the nod to my demo to Robbie Williams, Rose Tattoo's manager, in a hotel room, in Adelaide, of all places, while he was on tour with the Party Boys. So thanks, Joe. It is what it is, and the funny thing is, if this makes any sense to you, most of the songs on the Judge Mercy EP and album were going to be Rose Tattoo songs. I was paid a retainer to stay home and write songs for Rose Tattoo, and I just kept sitting there and nothing ever happened. And eventually, out of frustration, I went, well, I'm going to do a record myself. And that's really, so if you think Judge Mercy kicks some butt, that's kind of what Beats from a Single Drum should have been. And that's the truth. That's absolutely what should have happened. So there you go.
After Born to Be Wild was released, John Mayer exits the band, and Beats from a Single Drum was done when the band were a four-piece. So I guess as a young musician, you obviously loved the past Rose Tattoo material. Did you feel at that stage, I guess, a weight on your shoulders or a desire to step up and prove yourself, show Angry and Mushroom, I guess, what you were capable of? I mean, because your involvement in that album, as you mentioned, is immense.
I didn't feel any pressure. I felt that coming from a kind of a hard rock background, that I didn't like the way it was being, lightened and made to be a little more, palatable. But I didn't shy away from thinking that the songs, weren't good. I mean, you mentioned good Say Goodbye. I forgot about that song completely until now. And that's a really good song and a great riff. It just, with 5-part harmonies, that just gets light, and then you throw some keys on it, and it's like, I never liked keyboards in bands. I liked, guitar bands, two guitars, bass, drums, and vocals. So I didn't feel any pressure. I didn't feel like I had to prove myself. We had a couple of John songs still there. I just saw it as a great opportunity, and people were sort of, happy that I was a writer. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm 22 years old, and I've got, all these songs on the record. That's great, but no pressure. It was a great time for me. A really great time, and I mean, it was my childhood dream, being on the road with a rock and roll band, and I still got to play Scarred for Life, and I still got to play Bad Boy and Rock and Roll Outlaw, and I still got to play all those great rock and roll songs. It was hard to live up to those anthems. It really was.
Kevin Beamish, he was in Australia at the time, and I believe he produced Geisha, Uncanny X-Men, V Capri. Why not stay with Vanda and Young, who'd done Southern Stars?
I really don't know. I think maybe it was, this was the first record for Mushroom as opposed to Albert's. So I'm assuming that had a lot to do with it. As I said, listening back today to from Flash in the Pan to Edie to the Easy Beats we were listening to today with my kids, I mean, they were just unbelievable songwriters. I would put it down to the fact that it was a move to Mushroom, and probably, with Angry's movie career and TV career going, probably a move more to the mainstream. And they saw that, with Kevin's background with REO Speedwagon and, big hits in the 80s and stuff, I guess they saw that as a good avenue towards that goal. But that's all I can really put it down to. But I would say the main thing was a shift away from Albert's. I mean, if we would have still been at Albert's, then I think that probably, Harry and George would have done it. I actually, one of my biggest thrills was later in it must have been, it's Judge Mercy though, so the early 90s, I got called in to Albert's to do background vocals on a Flash in the Pan record, and I got to work, that's how I finally got to work with Harry and George, and it was such a great experience. I had a blast.
Nice, mate. Let's take a break and play a couple of tunes back to back. The aforementioned Sun's Gonna Shine, followed by Suddenly, a song you co-wrote which went top 5 in both Australia and the UK. And I know it's divided a lot of hardcore Tats fans. I think it's a very beautiful song. Is that you playing the guitar solo in Suddenly, or Tim Gaze?
That's Tim Gaze playing the guitar solo, and me with my resplendent mullet doing the mime in the video.
Is that your piano arrangement?
It's me playing piano, and I play piano and fretless bass. I think I may have played all the keys I was instructed to play, but it's definitely me playing piano on that and fretless, yeah.
Mate, let's cut to a couple of songs. 1985's Sun's Gonna Shine, which was the B-side to Born to Be Wild, followed by the ballad Suddenly. That was Suddenly, which was when it was aired in the UK during a TV wedding of Scott and Charlene in Neighbours. It was heard and viewed by 20 million viewers. Mate, you cannot get better exposure than that. Apparently, Kylie Minogue owned Beats from a Single Drum and chose that song herself for that TV wedding. I have to ask, what's your method for songwriting?
Boy, it's changed over the years. In those days, it would start with a guitar riff, and then, with Rose Tattoo, I'd have a stack of lyrics from Angry, and, I'd go through them in a little folder and go, oh, this works. I'd have a melody in my head, and we'd work on things together that way. And he'd come over to my place and, sing into a little 4-track recorder that I used to demo on. And Judge Mercy was the same. It was very riff-driven, and I'd just sort of basically scat sort of sounds over the top of it, and then have a subject to talk about and shoehorn the lyric in there. And these days, I've got a band in New York called Shotgun Wedding, which is we call it a city country band, and it kind of starts from the lyric. If I write with Dennis, the guitar player, we sit down and go, what do we want to talk about? And we'll think subject matter, and off we'll go. And the melody and the chord structure will follow that. So it varies, and some of it's lyric driven, some of it's music driven, some of it's walking down the street with a certain tempo in your step, and next minute you're sort of humming something, and boom, where's the quick, get the phone out and get the idea down. It's nice to have a different approach for different kinds of songs.
Well, mate, in researching this interview, I found a bunch of old gig dates, including one where you played with Rose Tattoo, February 1987 at the Kalgoorlie Racecourse, which makes me want to ask you, throughout your career, where's the strangest place you've ever played a gig?
Wow, Kalgoorlie Racecourse. I remember doing one of the strangest ones there's two strange ones. One would be with Billy Thorpe, and I can't remember the town, but it's somewhere up in the northwest. It's a mining town, and I can't think of the name, but we played in a boxing ring. There was a boxing ring in the middle of this pub, outdoor garden, and obviously the miners would come in and get it on a Saturday night and beat the crap out of each other. We played in a boxing ring, so that was special. And I also remember doing a Judge Mercy gig at Eastern Creek Racecourse at about 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, while cars were qualifying for races and running around the outside of the track. That was pretty special.
Wow.
And I also, another one with Pete Wells back in 95 in the Australian consulate in Bonn, Germany. And it was the most happening gig in Bonn. And that was like, of all the places to play, it's like, oh no, man, this is the best club in all of Bonn. You got to play the Australian consulate. It rocks. So there's another weird one for you.
Let's pick up from your timeline here. So during a period of inactivity with Rose Tattoo, when I think Angry did the Rasputin thing, you joined the James Rain Band, correct?
I did. I did a little thing in between that, which I'd like to mention because I had a great time doing it, and that was I played with Swanee for about 6 months. And
okay.
As an Adelaide boy, Swanee was always big news to us, and it's interesting because the guy that was Swanee's tour manager, a gentleman called Noel Rush, who was went on to tour manage the Divinals and Jimmy Barnes and Noiseworks for years. He's now road manager to AC/DC. He's also Billy Joel's security coordinator. He's my best friend, and that's when we'd met. Before that, he's also a 7th Dan black belt and, worked as part of the Bob Jones organization, ran security at lots of concerts. But we met in a gym in Bondi Junction, World Gym, and he was tour managing Swanee. I was playing with the Tats. We'd go and see each other's bands. And from that, we became kind of best mates. And it's due to Noel that I came to New York in the first place. So Swanee was so much fun for those 6 months. It was a great band. John Layler on drums, Bruno Renzella on guitar, Peter Northcote on sax. Really lots and lots of fun. It was a really smoking band. And we just did that for I think 6 months while we waited for the Rose Tattoo record to come out, for Beats from Single Drum to come out. So from that they went back to the Beats tour in 87, and then at the end of 87 I joined James Rain.
Did you demo anything with Swanee during that time period?
I can't remember. I don't think so.
Okay, and I believe you played bass on the Sons of Steel soundtrack, a post-apocalyptic heavy metal action sci-fi musical. Apart from the soundtrack, did you have any other involvement in that?
No, I just did that soundtrack with Steve James producing and the guys from a band called Black Alice.
That's
and,
right.
We did it pretty quickly, but Steve did a great job. Steve also did, I think, Steve had also done did he do the first Screaming Jet stuff? The first EP, maybe?
Steve James?
Steve James.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and Steve was great to work with, and I actually got a shout out from him the other day, and so no, we just did that in about 2 or 3 weeks. I think Scott Johnston played drums on it too. That's my only involvement with that, and apart from going to see the movie, which was was good fun.
Early 1990, you play on Angry's Blood from Stone record, including what I consider to be two of his strongest ever songs, the top 10, Bound for Glory, and also Heaven. Now, I saw Angry a couple of times during that time period. He had Jim Hilbert on bass, Bobby Barth from Axe and Blackfoot, and Rob Riley on guitars. They were incredible. And I think outside of the Tats, that's been one of his best ever lineups.
I agree. And please don't forget, one of the greatest groove rock drummers ever, Tim Poles on drums.
That's right.
And Tim Poles played on the first Judge Mercy demos. It was just Tim and myself. Tim is one of the swingingest rock and roll, straight ahead drummers. Everyone thinks of him as being from the Venetians and being like an 80s pop guy with a flock of seagulls haircut. But man, that guy rocks as hard as anyone I've ever played with.
He's got like the Phil Rudd kind of swing.
Man, he is just. I mean, I've still got those demos, and he really. It's a credit to Mick O'Shea that came in later that he played those songs as well as Tim did, because Tim rocks like all hell, and he's out playing with the Church. He'd just been over here. We just missed each other actually, but Tim was in that band, in the live band that did that Blood from Stone tour, and great lineup. I did go and see them actually in Bondi one night. They were great, and that was a fun record to do too.
Okay, so let's focus on Judge Mercy a little bit. Judge Mercy seemed to have all the ingredients for success. Strong, original and catchy tunes, great musicianship, some media support too, and right from the get-go, the band was incredibly hard-working. You had to build up that profile. From memory, the band were always playing live and earning its stripes. Now, you obviously had high hopes for Judge Mercy to break internationally and, I guess, follow bands like The Jets and Mortal Sin, who both took some steps outside of Australia. Was your plan to tour or even relocate internationally?
I moved away from Australia reluctantly. But when you aspire to be successful in the music business, you aspire to do that on an international level. And I did take the very first, those demos I mentioned to you with Tim playing on them were heard by Doug Thaler, who was managing Motley Crue at the time, and he wanted to manage me and take me to LA and put an LA band around me, and I just felt that. The guys in Judge Mercy had already given me, like 6 months or 8 months of solid touring for no money, and I just thought that we were a gang, and I didn't go with it. That was pretty intense 5 years. We gave it 110%. It didn't work, and I have no regrets. And I look back now when I thought it was just so perfect. I can see the holes in it now. There are things I would have done differently. Things I personally made mistakes. But I'm proud of what we did, and I thought we were a great live band, which perhaps we didn't quite capture it in the studio, and that's mainly my fault. By just I was such a control freak. I wanted it so bad that I couldn't delegate enough and have faith in other people around me that were more experienced in certain areas. But no regrets, man. It was a great 5 years or 4 years, whatever it was, and I thought we had a great live reputation. The few people that there's still some people that think we were pretty awesome. So that's enough for me. I'm glad that we gave our all.
I recall seeing the band many times. King's Cross, Banjos at Gladesville. One show at the DY Hotel, which from memory stands out, as I think that was the one recorded for the live EP. But I also remember the band playing a pretty strong set at the Horden, supporting Iron Maiden in 1992. Did you do the whole tour with Iron Maiden or just Sydney?
just Sydney, and it was we weren't a metal band really. We were kind of, I don't know, we were somewhere between straight ahead, Australian rock and kind of a little more progressive, but we certainly weren't what I would think of as a metal band. That was a good year for us because we weren't really signed yet. We did the Iron Maiden thing, and we opened for AC/DC as well on the Razor's Edge tour. But for Iron Maiden, it was just the Horden. For AC/DC, we were just supposed to do the 3 Sydney shows. They went off to, I think, Adelaide and Melbourne and didn't like the other bands that were opening for them or something, so the story goes. So they then called us and picked our gear up in Sydney, and we went off to do the Brisbane shows as well.
Well, mate, let me run something past you. Earlier this year, I had Chris Bonacci from Girls School and before that, Sweet Jane on the show. And I mentioned to her that the Australian pub rock scene was a very tough breeding ground for many, many bands, and that it was this environment that made her quite battle-hardened by the time she exited Australia for the UK. I guess you served, a similar type of apprenticeship in that harsh live environment. Did this background, do you think, benefit you, harden you up, I guess, for what lay ahead in the US?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And I'm going to recall my first conversation I ever had with Mutt Lange, and that was the day that I auditioned for Shania Twain in late '97. And we were chatting after I was playing, and he, we were chatting. He said, "What is it about you Aussies? You play differently. You play differently to anyone else in the world." I'm like, "Well," I said, Mutt, I think that you probably work with the finest example of a rock band from our country, AC/DC. I said, I think I was lucky to catch the end of the way where I would play 6 nights a week, 46 weeks a year. I said, but the AC/DC guys, they were doing doubles on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. They were playing 11, 12 shows a week. And you just can't get that kind of, match fitness from being in a rehearsal studio. And that doesn't exist. It never existed in Los Angeles or in the UK. We played and played and played. And I remember being on the road and going, Monday night, we've got Monday night off. We're in Rockhampton. We're going to go to the movies. I want to play. We wanted to play. And I absolutely think that the fact that, some of us have done okay over here as touring guys and stuff comes from that mindset that we love to get out there and gig. And the Australian pub rock scene absolutely was the foundation of what I do for sure, and as confirmed by one of the greatest record producers of all time, Mutt Lange. So I just love that period. I mean, those years you're speaking of Rose Tattoo and Swanee and James Rain and Judge Mercy, it was awesome. I mean, I know that in those years we were on the road forever, and it was great.
I know that in hindsight it's easy to look back, but with the wealth of experience you've had since that time, would you have done anything, or what would you have done differently with Judge Mercy?
I didn't know any better. I thought I was doing the best I could. I look back at some of the songs now, and some of them don't stand up. I would have let John Jansen, the producer, have more free reign when it came to mixing the record. And the one mistake I did make was that we almost should have gigged all the way through while we were recording, because we were such a good, strong live band. And vocally, I had kind of taken 6 weeks off while we were recording and tracking the record. And I look back now and remember that whenever we took periods of time off, I'd go back out on the road, and like the second or third night I'd lose my voice for a day or two, and then it would come back. I wasn't exercising the muscle, and I should have. Vocally, I'm not happy with that record at all. And if you listen to the live EP, it sounds great. It's just raw in one take. But the studio album, I had to work hard for that, and that was just down to me not being match fit. So that's one thing. But no regrets, man. I love the guys in the band. I'm still friends with all of them, and I did the best I could. And no regrets.
I've got a fun fact. Your former bandmate, Craig Foster, played bass on Dave Evans' 2008 album, Judgment Day, which is a great heavy rock album. Search that album down, folks, if you do not own it. Now, I guess you've had international success with both Shania Twain and Billy Joel now for a long time, but you came up through the ranks as a heavy rock guy. Obviously, that style is still close to your heart.
Oh, absolutely. If you... You should have seen me banging my head today as I was listening to, Riff Raff live from, the Apollo in 1978 with Bond, just going, my goodness, what a train, that rhythm section. No, that's in my DNA, I'm a hard rock guy. It started, like I said, as a very young kid. Believe it or not, the first time I heard the guitar riff in the Raspberries Go All the Way, it's a big, filthy guitar riff. Ding, 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 get. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. I still remember one of the first singles I ever bought was Bachman Turner Overdrive. You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Massive guitar sound. I still remember songs like The Stroke. By Billy
Squier.
Billy Squier. Massive guitar. I love big fat guitars, and so that's where I come from. I like a whole range of different material. And as I said, I'm playing a country band now. The Shania Twain thing was kind of, a crossover country, I guess. But also before that, I was playing with Five for Fighting, which was another piano-driven band. Don't forget that's my first instrument really was classical piano. So, but my core, is rock and roll. Absolutely.
I think that the Shania Twain song, Man, I Feel Like a Woman, that's my favourite song. I think that's what you're talking about. Great thumping, guitar-based rock and roll song. Anyone would, loves that song. Easy to take.
Unless you've played it 10 or 15,000 times. Having said that, it's another conversation. I remember with a lot of people who auditioned for that position, the guitar position, had a problem really getting that riff to swing. And I still remember Mutt saying, man, it's just AC/DC. It's what it is. I'm like, it's LaGrange, Mutt, right? And it's the same riff. That's sure. It. And it's just, you just got to be able to swing. And, that is a great riff. As I said, that song I've played so many times, it gives me a tick. But it was a great band, and I got to play with a mighty, mighty groove drummer in J.D. Blair for all those years. So it was a fun time. It was welcome to the States. I got this great job, and I'm not there anymore because I couldn't swing both Shania and Billy. But I had a great time doing it while I could do both.
Well, I think that the last time I saw you play live in the pubs of Sydney was in around 95. It was upstairs at the Lansdowne Hotel in Sydney, at Broadway there. You were playing with Pete Wells and Mick O'Shea in a band called Romeo Dog. That Romeo Dog album is really, really good, by the way, which did well in Germany, I believe.
We had that was a great time because we'd just come out of a bit of legal battle over the Judge Mercy nonsense, and that was the end of that band. And Pete had called me to say, you want to come to Germany for 6 weeks, and we'll drink some beer and smoke some cigarettes and eat some sausage. And I'm like, sure, man. And Mick was going to do it, and so my buddy from Judge Mercy and Lucy and Pete, and off we went in a station wagon around Germany for 6 weeks and had a blast and did that record in about a week in a little town called Buna in the middle of Germany. And Andy, what was his last name? Anderson joined us for that. He was a massive rose tattoo head, and it's just, man, we did it so quickly and it's so pure. But it was good fun, and I really, Pete was a sweetheart, man. A sad loss. Looking at that, even at the Outlaw clip today, going, wow, no Mick, no Digger, no Pete, just. But good fun, and that was always great playing with Pete. It was always ear to ear grin,
And of course, Billy Thorpe pieces together one hell of a lineup. In 1996, Randall Waller, Steve Edmonds on guitar, yourself on bass, and again Paul DeMarco on drums. That's some serious firepower in that lineup. I guess you got great memories of playing with Thorpe.
That was a special band. I mean, I remember when Paul DeMarco called me about getting involved in that, and I'm like, the first thing is I'd seen Billy come back with the Aztecs at Salinas, and they were mighty. I mean, they were just. My goodness, the guy still had pipes and they rocked hard. And I'm like, okay. And he said, Paul said, Billy's really got some good songs. So I was thinking this could have been a Farnham, that really could be the great comeback story. And I signed on immediately. We went down and had a play, Paul and myself and Billy, just a three-piece. And in fact, we then went off and did like 2 or 3 shows in a weekend, including the Byron Bay Blues Festival, as a 3-piece. And man, we made a lot of noise for 3 of us. It was so much fun. That gig is one of my top 10 gigs ever. That first gig with Billy at Byron. Oh yeah, it was as a 3-piece. It was mighty. I wish I could find some footage of it. It was so much fun. And Billy worked on some good songs. We demoed some stuff up, and it just seemed to take a long time to get anything on recorded in a final form that we could release. It just dragged on and on and on. I'm not sure whether Billy was a little concerned about messing with his legacy or whatever it was, but that was kind of the catalyst for me going, I can't wait anymore. I'm not getting any younger, and if I don't try the States now, it'll be too late. So that's kind of why I upped and left, really. But it was a fantastic band, and I had nothing but fond memories of touring with Billy, and also even with Dragon at the same time. I was sort of toing and froing between the last couple of nights of Dragon, and playing those great pop songs was a whole bunch of fun.
Okay, so you got Randall Waller, the gig with Shania Twain, correct?
Correct, I did, yes.
Okay. Amazing guitar player. Some of that Avion material I've owned. The first LP is a classic, I think, which, if I think back to that time period, it suffered from lack of airplay more than anything else. But I'm fairly certain I saw Randall with Sharon O'Neill. I know he played with Rodney Crowell quite recently. Don't want to get off track, but I saw Rodney Crowell and Emmylou Harris a couple of months back. Incredible, and I'm getting way off track. But
it's okay. I love what you're talking about. I mean, Randy Crowell is awesome, and can I tell you that the first band I went to see when I got to Sydney was Avion, because I just thought from being a kid in Adelaide, watching all those bands come across Countdown, I'm like, this band is just on another level. They are so good. The songs are so good. The vocals are so good. Randall was such a great singer, such a great guitar player, and it was a real thrill to play with him in Billy's band, because when I got to Sydney, he was in the UK working with Bonnie Tyler and doing all sorts of other stuff, and it was like working with a hero of mine. We became fast friends, and when we needed that position filled in Shania's band, a great lead guitar player who can sing like a bird, and I got the guy. We couldn't find him on the States. I said, I got the guy, and literally auditioned him over the telephone. And, they sent him out a ticket, and he was on the plane. And, like shaking his head at a hotel in Manhattan going, are you kidding me? How did this happen? Like, welcome aboard.
Good story. Love those stories.
Yeah.
Mate, you've performed at Shea Stadium. I believe you've also sound-checked to Let It Be with Paul McCartney, back Steven Tyler. Is it possible to name a couple of recent career highlights? I guess jamming with Macca would have to be up there.
Yeah, that was a big day. July 18, 2008. I actually was sworn in as a U.S. citizen that morning. So I have dual citizenship now. So at 7 o'clock, I was at the courthouse in Brooklyn, and going, okay, and tonight I'm going to headline Shea Stadium with Billy. That's pretty cool. We didn't know McCartney was coming. I knew that Tyler was going to be there, and he was unbelievable. That's one of my all-time heroes. I mean, Aerosmith's just a massive influence on me. And basically, it was stinking hot, and I remember Billy calling me aside, Billy Joel saying, I need to speak to you. I'm like, what's up? I said, well, Paul's coming. And I said, Paul who? He rolls his eyes, McCartney. I'm like, oh yeah, him. He says, well, listen, he might want to play bass. And I'm going, no way, man. This is Shea Stadium. This is a big day for me. I was sworn in this morning, And he's rolling his eyes, and I'm going, listen, it's 100 degrees out there. We've been sound checking all these special guests tonight. You've got the only dressing room to shower. You let me bleep and take a bleep and shower in your bleep and dressing room, and I'll let bleep and Paul McCartney play bass. And he said, go take a bleep and shower. And so Paul got up and did, a sort of standing there with us, and then we went off stage. It was the encore, and it was literally in a huddle because it was totally unrehearsed. And Billy said, what do you want to play? And he says, well, what about if we were going to do She Loves You. And he goes, Paul literally was like, I don't know how it goes. I haven't played it in 30 years. And he said, what about Let It Be? And I just said, Paul, will you be playing piano or bass on it? And he said, I thought I'd play piano. So I grabbed the bass and I'm like, off we go. So it's literally live. That's the last thing we do, I think, on stage at the 60-something thousand people. And the last thing we do is a completely unrehearsed version of Let It Be. And it will never leave me. It's when you think back to how this interview started, and my Aunt Margaret gave me A Hard Day's Night. It was a moment I'll never forget. Shay was awesome. Playing in front of the Colosseum in Rome, 2007 was awesome. The best gig I've ever done with Billy Joel, though, would be, I would say, that one of the most exciting gigs apart from Shay, Jazz Fest in New Orleans in 2013. We really hadn't been on the road at all for a couple of years. We'd come out to do the biker thing in Sydney. What was it called? Stone Music Festival, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. And then we went to New Orleans to do Jazz Fest, and it was hot, and we were great. I mean, we just listened to each other because we were a little on edge because things were, we hadn't played much, and it was a real special show. And then I went back to Vegas to, man, I feel like a woman.
A hell of a story. I love that. Let me ask you a left of centre question before we finish up. And I know that we've spoken a lot tonight about your days in the on the Australian pub circuit. So you have played a lot of those venues. Is there any particular band, in your opinion, who should have made it big but didn't?
Well, I mean, I would say Avion, right there. They should have been huge. They were exceptional. I think that it was a great filter, the pub rock scene, and I think that if you couldn't deliver live, the Australian public wouldn't give you the nod, and you wouldn't get through. I mean, you think about the great bands that have come from that thing. I mean, Cold Chisel, The Angels, I mean, Midnight Oil. What an amazing live band they were. I mean, I think I mentioned to you today that Head Injuries is probably maybe my favourite Australian album of all time, just for the quality of songwriting, if nothing else. But they all came from that same breeding ground. I would have to say probably Avion. I really think they deserve to be huge, and they could play.
No argument there.
No
argument there.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that one for sure, Dennis.
Mate, what are your plans for the rest of 2015? You mentioned you have an outfit called Shotgun Wedding. I have listened to the single City Boy. I'm a City Boy, Concrete Cowboy, very solid, and I think the vocalist Catherine Porter has a stunning voice. I guess you're working on an album?
The album's done, and you probably saw a live performance of that song.
I did, yes.
I will send you a SoundCloud of the entire record after we're done. Very, very happy with it. All recorded here in my little Sesame Street house in Brooklyn. Single coming out at the beginning of October. City Boy will be the single. Album coming out at the end of January, early February. A band I love playing with Billy Joel's drummer Chuck Berge, like I said, Rainbow and Blue Oyster Cult, and et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot of fun. I'm still playing with Billy. In fact, I'm playing Madison Square Garden with him tomorrow night. That amazing run continues where we play Madison Square Garden once a month. I think we're up to, what is it? It's September, so 9 and 12 it's the 21st show we've done in a row. And he continues to break records. We did baseball stadiums all summer here. Billy's just, doing amazing business, and I hope that will carry on. It's 2 or 3 shows a month with him, and revving up for this Shotgun Wedding release, and that's keeping me busy. It's a lot of fun.
And if listeners wish to learn more, they can head to shotgunweddingnyc.com. Mate, we better wrap this up. You've had a great career thus far, one which started in Adelaide and has taken you all over the world. Many of us have fond memories of seeing you live with both Rose Tattoo and Judge Mercy, and it's been an honour to have you on the show and to look over some of your rock and roll memories. Before you go, I've got to ask if you ever get any Tats or Judge Mercy fans approach you in the US?
Rose Tattoo fans, absolutely. There's a huge awareness of that band, and that was also because of the Guns N' Roses awareness, covering Nice Boys Don't Play Rock and Roll. In fact, I remember being cornered by Matt Sorum and Duff McKagan in Los Angeles many years ago, and having a rather large night out in the town. But that band really has carries its weight over here. Judge Mercy, not so much. We never really did anything over here, but no, man, I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of my rock and roll roots, and
as you should be.
It's all down to that pub scene in Australia for sure.
Well, we're going to end this show with the Judge Mercy tune, Bleed Me Dry, which, when played loud, still sounds absolutely fantastic. Let's close out with one of your choice cuts. Every guest gets to choose a song by an Australian band. Can be one of yours or a song which has had some significance for you. What would you like to hear and why?
Even though we spoke about Rock and Roll Outlaw, which was huge for me, I'm going to go with Stand in Line by Midnight Oil off the Head Injuries record. I think if that album was re-recorded today with current sounds and stuff, it would still stand up as a groundbreaking record. I think it's just a fantastic record. And Andrew James, the original bass player, was an amazing talent.
Fantastic choice. Let's close out with Stand in Line by the Oils. Thanks again for your time today, Andy.
Absolute pleasure. Nice talking with you, Dennis. Bye-bye.